All right, welcome everyone. My name is Nirmala Singh and welcome to SQWM Mentorship's second annual mentorship series focused on the public sector. We are so excited to welcome you all to our virtual table tonight. As I said, my name is Nirmala Singh. I'm one of the founding board members of South Queens Women's March. And we are so excited to see some familiar names and faces. So welcome back. And to everyone who's joining us for the first time, welcome to South Queens Women's March. I'll tell you a little bit about our organization. So we were founded a little over, 2 years now at the height of the pandemic. We are a local gender justice nonprofit here in South Queens, working to foster women's empowerment and really just fight all of the injustices that support patriarchy and gender injustice here in South Queens. I can't wait for you to hear from our amazing lineup of panelists that we have here tonight. Just to tell you a little bit about the overview of tonight's workshop. So you're going to hear from our four amazing panelists that we have. We have some questions that were curated by the audience and also some of our own South Queens Women's March members. So we'll have that facilitated discussion. While that's happening, please feel free to drop questions in the chat. Afeza, who's also on the call, I'll hand it over to you shortly. You can also unmute because she'll be stopping throughout the conversation, and you can ask any questions that you may have. We'll also have about 20 minutes towards the end where you'll be put into breakout rooms with one of the panelists of your choice, and then you can ask them more questions directly and also form connections with folks that are also joining this call. But we are so excited, and I just want to thank all of our panelists for joining us here tonight. Can't wait to hear all of your expertise and all of your stories that you're willing to share with everyone here. And welcome again, everyone. I'll throw it to Afeza to start our facilitated discussion.
Of course. Hello, everyone, and welcome. I'm so grateful to be here. And I just want to say thank you to all of our amazing panelists for giving back to our community. It means so much to us at South Queens Women's March. And I think we can begin our discussion tonight by just having a brief introduction from all of our amazing panelists. So anyone, please feel free to begin.
I'm happy to go first. So my name is Mone't Schultz. I am the Deputy Chief of Staff and Legislative Director for New York State Assembly Member Khaleel M. Anderson. We cover a really interesting part of Southeast Queens. JFK is in the heart of our district. So we cover Rockaway proper, we cover Far Rockaway, we cover South Ozone Park. Now, we used to cover South Benjamin Hill as well, but with the redistricting, we now only have South Ozone Park on that part of the district. We also cover Rosedale and Laurelton and parts of Springfield. So that's what I do in my professional life, and that's why I've been selected for the panel for the public sector. But I am a Guyanese immigrant. I came to this country when I was 10 years old. So I am here for 16 years now. So I'm very much so, involved and a part of the South Queens community. So I think that pretty much sums up what you need to know about me on the surface, and we'll get into the rest during the questions.
Thank you so much for sharing.
I guess I will go next. Good evening, everyone. My name is Kevin Morris. I am the Queens Borough Director for the Mayor's Community Affairs Unit. And essentially what my role in the Mayor's office is that I am citywide coordination of services, resources, and information on behalf of the mayoral administration. That can be everything from if there are small scale issues in the community or concerns, it is my job to bring those matters to the administration and make sure that the mayor is aware of all of the community's needs. I handle the eastern portion of Queens, everything from Douglaston and Little Neck down through the Rockaways. I am a proud New Yorker, born and raised, proud Southeast Queens native. I grew up in Far Rockaway till I was 13 years old, then moved out to South Jamaica. I am a West Indian American. My paternal grandmother is Guyanese, and then all the rest of my grandparents and my parents are all Bajan from the small island of Barbados. So I'm very proud to be here tonight with such an amazing panel of other speakers and elected officials, representatives, and community leaders. I'm just honored to be here tonight speaking with all of you.
Thank you so much. We're so happy to have you with us here tonight.
I can go next. Shout out to the Westinians because here we are. I'm so proud of us all. Hey y'all, my name is Fayola. I use she, they pronouns, and I am a 9-10 global history teacher at a high school in the Lower East Side. It's actually my first year teaching, so I'm a first year teacher, and I'm super excited to be here tonight. So thank you all for like putting this on and holding this space for us. Yeah, I'm really excited and thinking about the ways in which we can support our communities in a variety of different capacities, and really thinking about how our role as folks in the public sector is directly thinking about the needs of our communities and addressing those needs in various different ways. So nice to meet you all.
Thank you so much.
I think I'm the last person, right? Okay. Hey everyone, I'm Steph Halpin. My pronouns are she, hers. I am also a native New Yorker, born and raised in the Bronx. I have to say the Queen's representation tonight is a little intimidating, but I'm gonna hold it down for my borough tonight. I'm Steph. I am so appreciative to be here. Thank you, Nirmala, for reaching out. Nirmala and I go way back. We used to work together at the mayor's office. I'm still with city government. I'm the communications director for the Racial Justice Commission. And what else do you need to know about me as a human? So that's my job. My other job is I'm a mom. So I'm a full-time mom, full-time comms director. And I am excited to be here tonight. I'm excited to provide whatever information is helpful and useful. And yeah, thanks.
Thank you so much for being here. So I will begin with the questions, and feel free to go in any order you like. The first question is, what skills would one need to be successful and advance in your role? So basically, let's say a college student is interested to, perform your role in the future. What skills should they master while they're still in school?
I can go first, Steph. It's all right. For the role of Borough Director in Community Affairs, a lot of the work is really around engagement of the community. So it helps to, it's not necessary, but it helps to be a member of the community in which you are doing the engagement for, because it helps to understand the dynamics of the community, the people, who the stakeholders are, being able to make those vital connections and those relationships with the people in the community, because they have to be able to believe and trust that you're coming from a place of love. And, being a resident of Southeast Queens, it helps me to be the borough director for this area, because I know these people, I know their concerns, I know their problems, because these are the same concerns and problems I had growing up in this community. It also helps to, be a very outgoing and personable person, because people want to believe that they can come to you with your issues and you're not going to just push it or throw it under the rug, that, you care and that there's a genuinity to what it is that you do. It also helps to have a very free schedule, because you spend a lot of late nights and weekends doing this job, because community affairs does not end.
Thank you so much for sharing.
I guess I can go next. I think I agree with everything that Mr. Morrison said. Are we using first names or last names on this? I'll go with.
Well, you can call me Kevin.
So I'm gonna go with, I agree with everything Kevin said, because it's very, very important to be personable. It's very, very important to be honest and really move from a place of genuine integrity. I think that a lot of the times people, undeniably so, and in their own right, have a fear and an opposition to government if you're from a certain portion of certain communities, right? Because the government has done some things and continue to do things that are in the interests of some folks and not in the interests of the majority. But I think what's really important to remember, if you're thinking about this sector, and specifically in my role as a legislative director, which I am, I guess, half of the year when we're in a legislative season, it's just really important to understand that change can come. Unfortunately, it will be incremental, but change can happen. And being a legislative director, and I guess also a deputy chief of staff, it's just really important to be really organized and to actually be a critical thinker, right? I think a lot of what we see today in social media and just the fastness of the culture in globalization is this need to like fulfill things very quickly and immediately. And that's just not realistic on how the world actually works in the real world. So it's really important to be a critical thinker and to actually take stock of what your self-awareness is if you're thinking about this field, right? How do you show up in the world? How does the world see you? And how can you marry those two identities to really be your best self in this space?
Thank you. Those are some really amazing tips. So I'll repeat the question again. So what skills would one need to be successful and advance in your role?
I think it's hard for me to answer because I kind of just started, and so I'm still trying to figure that out for myself. But one thing I've noticed in the past semester, I just finished my first semester of teaching, which has been very fun and interesting and chaotic and all of those things at once. But one thing I've noticed is really understanding the importance of being able to ask for help and being able to ask questions. I think, especially with teaching where there's so many different aspects of the role, lesson planning is one thing, but then student outreach or like parent outreach is another thing. And then grading is another thing. And actually leading a lesson and classroom management, all of those things are different aspects of that role. And it would really put me at a disadvantage if I went into my first day of teaching. It was like, oh, I know everything. There's nothing I need to know, and there's nothing anyone can tell me. And so really being open-minded, really being able to say like, hey, this is an issue I had in my classroom. Like, how would you address this in yours? Or saying, this is something that happened. This is what I thought about. This is how I handle the situation. Would you do it similarly, differently? And just being really able to rely on my community of teachers, and really need to have that conversation around, I need support, and how can we all be here to support each other? Just remembering that you're never alone, that there are people who have been where you are currently, and people who understand where you're coming from and understanding that position. So definitely keeping that sense of like open-mindedness, keeping a sense of curiosity, and knowing that you can always learn. You can always make mistakes, but that's always an opportunity to learn something new.
Thank you so much for sharing. These are such great answers. I just wanted to take the time to recap. So, we have Steph to go. I'm sorry.
I'll be quick. I definitely second everything that was said so far, particularly on critical thinking, and that being kind of blended with the reality and the nature of, what you can do in your job. When you take on a job, there are ceilings to which you can move things forward, and finding the balance of, okay, if this is really what I care about, what can I move forward in my work? What can I move forward in my personal life? So definitely that. But if we're talking like skills like writing, huge, being able to communicate what you have in your head to your coworkers, to people around you, to the public, that is so, so, so huge. You don't have to be, a perfect grammatical writer. Like you don't have to have great grammar, but you need to be able to get across what you want to say. And, especially like with external communications, recognizing that we're speaking to, a city of almost 9 million people. Not everyone thinks the same way. Not everybody reads at the same level. Maybe not everyone is interested in the same things that we're interested in. So being able to kind of take what you have in your minds, translate it to either written or, a verbal kind of communication and get it out there. So that's kind of like, to me, one of the hard skills that I think is a little underrated. Being able to like write an email to your coworker that actually clearly says like, hey, I need help in this way. Or what do you think of this? Like, does this get my idea across? So That would be my hard skill, but definitely everything that is said, I totally co-sign.
Thank you so much for sharing. I myself also agree that being culturally competent is so important. Being able to communicate with diverse groups of people, super important. So just before I go to the next question, I just wanted to recap some of the amazing answers, which is understanding the dynamics of engagement, knowing what is important to your stakeholders, believe and trust in the concerns of the people, genuine integrity, being adaptable to change, organizational skills, critical thinking skills, self-awareness, not being afraid to ask for help, being open-minded, and being able to articulate and having good communication skills in the workplace. So thank you all so much for sharing. So the next question is, what does a typical workday look like for you?
Oh my gosh, should we break it down to like really crazy days and then like the most relaxed day? Does that sound good? Okay, I'll start. Crazy day. Let's see, reporters, journalists have questions, you need to get them answers. There's an event happening. You have to read a 100-page document, make sure there's no errors and it makes sense and that it's fact checked. And then you have to run home and maybe kiss your daughter to sleep. So that's like a crazy day. And then the chill day is like planning. Like we have 9 months ahead of us. What contracts do we need to bring in, and like thinking through that, like really getting to planning phase and thinking about like how are we going to achieve what we want to achieve. And that's more like thinking about things, doing some research, the Googles, and then maybe getting lunch with your like coworkers and then like going home. So that would be, those are my two. It's my crazy and then my like chill.
Thank you. I see there is a balance there. Research, planning, then get lunch with your coworker. I love that.
See, I'm always going to end up going second because I never want to go first twice in a row, but I'm always willing to go. So in terms of my position, I'm going to break it up into like seasons because it's ledge season right now. So every day is kind of like a crazy day for me up until June. So the legislative season happens between January and June of every year. I think this also coincides with a ton of other things. Like I think tax season is on the same schedule. So from the first 6 months of the year, being a legislative director and a deputy chief of staff, I'm kind of like juggling just multiple things. So a day can look like 8 a.m. I'm on, we could take this Wednesday, for example. I'm up talking to our NYCHA, working group. We're getting ready for a legislative briefing. We got to make sure this presentation is together with the residents, but also with the 4 other offices that we're working with, because we have 60 plus and, counting legislators and their staff that's going to be on that meeting at 9 a.m. That meeting ends at 9. Well, no, it ends at 10. I hurry up, get to battalion for our giveaway, go over there, make sure that things are running smoothly there, take the pictures, let the assembly member know that this is happening because he's up in Albany. So while he's up in Albany, I need to be his proxy in terms of being his legislative director, but also his deputy chief of staff to make sure that the constituency and their needs are also met at that same time, right? So then I get back to my car, drive over to the office, take, 6 meetings in 3 hours, half an hour each, go back, review budget letters, talk to our legislative team, see where we are with those sign-ons, check in with my chief of staff, see what's going on, over at the district office in the Rockaways. Then I, I'm running a meeting at 2:00 with all of the staff, including the chief of staff. And then, I'm helping him if he has stuff that's on his plate that might be overflowing, because whether you're a chief of staff, a deputy chief of staff, or anything that has a director in it, you're always going to be needed to do something. And there's always room to kind of, communally help each other. So our office is very much so. Oh, do you? Do you, Nirmala, miss those days? Our office is very communal in the way that we kind of take on our responsibilities. So if I have a little bit of downtime and I know he's swamped, and if he has a little bit of downtime, he knows, you know, we're swamped, we take care of it that way. Hopefully by 4 o'clock, I've had lunch. Then I'm reviewing, you know, documents, as Steph said, making sure this legislation makes sense, making sure the language makes sense, making sure the budget request actually is not too high or too low. Then I'm checking in with the assembly member at the end of the day, making sure that he has committed to what the things that he was supposed to do up in Albany. Then hopefully by 6 o'clock, I can close the office, you know, check in with our constituent liaison, make sure those cases are taken care of, answer whatever phone calls I get, and hopefully we are back at home safely by about 8 p.m. So that's like a 12-hour day on a legislative, you know, busy season day. On a, you know, I guess a off season, which would kind of be like the summertime, we have, maybe it's like a Friday. Our chief of staff and our team is really good about summer Fridays. So we'll typically close the office around 2 p.m. Throughout the week so that we can go out and support community events and make sure we're talking to our constituents and things like that. And then on that Friday, we do our staff building. So maybe we'll go to like Forest Hills Park and go into a little boat thing and do a little team building exercise. And that's like what a light day looks like on that end. But when it's busy, it's busy. But when it's light, we try to make it as enjoyable as we can.
Thank you so much.
So I can go next. So I have 3 types of days. There's the office day, there's a community day, and then there's the crisis day. So the way that an office day will usually work is I come to the office in the morning, sit down in front of my computer, and I'll get anywhere from a dozen to hundreds of emails, just questions from elected officials or community members, anything from we're having a constituent who has an issue with a housing bill or a problem from the budget community, from one of the budget offices where we need to connect with like Department of Buildings or Department of Finance to see if we can help them get put on a payment plan, or if there's an issue with like, say, a unlawful eviction where we're trying to help them like work with courts or connect with an agency like Department of Veteran Services if they're a veteran, just to make sure that they're being met or coordinated with the proper agency or the proper like city office that they need to get in touch with. There's the community day where I'll be out in the community at a local event or meeting with a elected official or community group or civic organization or community, you know, issues that are happening in the community or how we can assist, how we can support, attending events with the mayor where, you know, we're just giving him an idea for what's happening in the community, who some of the stakeholders are, who he needs to be meeting with to get an idea for what that community particularly needs. And then there are our crisis days where we're getting calls about fires and people being displaced from their homes, or an issue where we have a sewer backup where 200 homes get flooded and people have to be moved to a shelter or a hotel while we're working with Red Cross to get their things paid for. Or there's a hurricane where 2 people are killed and we need to work with the family to work on burial costs or assistance from the city. And with all of these things, you know, it takes a certain level of, you know, community engagement, but also empathy. You have to understand that to everyone, their concern or their problem is their biggest issue. And you can't treat any one issue as lesser than the other. So you have to prioritize everything while making time for everything. And, you know, once you've done all that and, you know, you finally get home at 1 o'clock in the morning, you get your text message from your supervisor saying, don't forget, you got to be in the office by 9 o'clock in the morning. Cool, no problem. But really, it's just trying to balance those 3 things, understanding when are days where it's acceptable to be in the office, days where you really need to be in the community because it's important for the community to be able to see your face and see the agency, see the mayor's office being part of their community in the everyday. And it's important to be there in the crisis days where people need someone to talk to. They need someone to just, who you can't always necessarily do what needs to be done in that moment, but just have that reassurance for them that someone is listening to them and that the help is coming one way or the other. So that's what a typical day like me tends to be.
For me, so Mondays are probably my busiest days. We started school at 9:25. In high school, I started school at 8. So I'm very thankful that we started at 9:25. That hour makes a very big difference. So we started at 9:25. I teach an hour-long class. Right now, I'm a global history teacher, so I am currently designing my own curriculum, thinking about World War I and World War II and kind of global struggles for human rights. So thinking about different human rights struggles that are happening during the 20th century. So we have an hour-long global class. I have a prep period. So that's a free period that I can use to grade or to plan or to meet with teachers or make copies or get food, like the whole host of things that I never have time for that all fits into my prep period. It's about an hour. Then I teach another class. We have lunch. I have another class after that. And then we have advisory. And we finish around 4:10. After 4, I'm usually in the building until maybe 5 or 6. And I'm grading, lesson planning, talking to students, having office hours. I'm also an advisor for our Black Student Union. So doing that work, doing work outside of like my job as a teacher. So I'm also I organize a mutual aid project called the Reading for Black Lives Project. So sometimes I'm staying late at work working for that, making copies, because the copier machines can smell fear. Like they know when your class is in 20 minutes and you need to make 80 copies for your 4 sections. They know, they can sense it. So having to make my copies. And then I also teach in the Lower East Side, but I live in South Jamaica and I'm from South Jamaica. So y'all know that F train commute, on that train for a bit, then the bus. So I get home maybe an hour, it's an hour and a half commute or so. And then again, grading, lesson planning, preparing for the next day, answering emails, and also to like as a teacher, especially as a Black teacher honestly at a school that has a primarily white staff, and which is the case for many schools in New York City, a lot of things will fall onto me as a teacher of color, as a Black teacher. So for example, it's Black History Month right now, and I'm responsible for a lot of the planning that goes into our Black History Month programming. And it's this kind of weird balance of like, there are other teachers too that can do this work, but I'm one of very few Black teachers. So if it's not me, then who? And so kind of the sense of there's always something more that I can be doing. There's always something else. There's always something that I can edit or change. And also too, as a first year teacher, really thinking about reflecting on my practice, really thinking about, okay, I made this worksheet, and even the smallest things like putting page numbers on your worksheets makes so much difference. So really thinking about my day and like taking time to reflect and being like, okay, this worked, this didn't work. I had this class do this lesson today. The next class is going to do this lesson. What can I change between the 2 lessons? So you're always, yeah, your mind is always racing. Sometimes I have dreams about school. It's a lot. Yeah, but I wouldn't change it for the world. I absolutely love it. Maybe, a longer break or, higher pay, anything like that. But besides that, absolutely love it.
Wow. I'm feeling so inspired and empowered by all of these amazing answers. You all do so much, and thank you. Thank you so much for all you do. I think some themes that I heard was community building is so important, and making everyone feel seen and heard, because everyone has a crisis and everyone's issues are a high priority. So next question is, what inspired you to choose this field?
Okay, fine, I'll bite. So this answer is a little bit complicated because this field kind of chose me. I graduated from Binghamton University, and when I went there, I spent 2 years studying chemistry. I worked for CUMC and, Hofstra Public Health. I really thought that my Guyanese parents and their orders to become a doctor was going to happen. And I remember having a conversation with my chem teacher in like office hours, and he's like, grading my test is literally an A. And he's like, Monet, I don't know if this field is for you. I'm like, but I'm not failing your class. Like, what do you mean? Like, I'm doing well. And he's just like, no, I don't think that like your voice will be heard here. And I was like, okay, great. But I didn't take that seriously at the time. I spent all of my college career being an organizer and agitator. I was on the Black Student Union. So if you ever want to talk about that, we can talk about that. I have some materials that could probably make your life a little easier over there. I spent a lot of time doing speech and policy debate. So I just gravitated towards things that, kind of aligned with this. However, my stubbornness was like, no one's going to tell me what to do with my life. So then, April of like 2018, I was going to graduate. I was like, I'm going to go, visit a law school. Maybe I'll consider law school. And then that was a really great experience. And then I just decided, okay, I think I'm going into public interest. And then I started working for the Legal Aid Society. Then my really good friend called me in 2020 and was like, Schultz, I'm running for state assembly. Will you be, my, campaign manager? And I was like, I have done college campaigns. Are you sure? And he's like, yeah, like grassroots, like we're building this from the ground up. We're going to do this. And I was like, but if we do this, you got to win because I don't lose. So we got to win. And that's how this field chose me. And now I'm his deputy chief of staff and his legislative director. So, we're here now. So sometimes it's not about you choosing your field. It's about what the universe aligns for you.
I couldn't agree more. I think for me, how did I end up in communications? I never stopped trying things that I loved or cared about or was interested in. And it started out like even in college, I transferred schools. I was on one track and I loved it, but it wasn't right for me. I wanted something different and I transferred and I followed that. And then after that, I followed another passion. Nirmala knows about AmeriCorps, but I became an AmeriCorps member. And then I did a fellowship and I was exposed to new different things that I had never really known about. I don't know about everyone else on here, but like my parents are not like professionals. Like my parents were not, we didn't have desk jobs, like they don't have desk jobs. That's, not their thing. I was not really exposed to like careers. We didn't have Zooms where we were like learning from other people, so it was just really about continuing to put my energy and effort into places, businesses, organizations that I was interested in. And I knew if I went there, that I would keep learning. And so, I used my early career and I feel like I'm still in my early career. I don't know about you guys, but I'm only 30 years old. I feel very young. I don't know how old everyone else is on here, but I use that time almost like as my grad school, to like continue to like get paid and to continue to grow and learn some skills. So, yeah, also I really have to thank the people that I've come to learn through the jobs and the places that I've worked at, because it's all been connections to other folks and really like, we keep talking about community here. And what does that mean? That means, talking about people when they're not there in a very good way. It means about thinking people, making connections for people. Community doesn't have to be like, okay, we're in the same space and we're doing this thing. It's about finding opportunities in all different shapes and forms and making sure that the people that surround you, that you're spreading that. So, yeah, I'm at this point, I think I'm rambling. So I'm going to pause and I'm going to hand it off to one of the other folks on here.
Shout out to AmeriCorps. I serve with city year in 2020, and then we know what happened with that, but it was a wonderful, yeah, it was a wonderful experience prior to March of 2020. So I never really, my mom's a teacher. She's been a teacher for the past 16 years, but I never really, I was like, oh yeah, that's cool, mom. Like, yeah, do you? I was thinking like, yeah, like maybe law, like maybe like entrepreneurship. And I wanted to be like, I was going to law for a very long time. In high school, I was doing mock trial. We went to Albany for the finals. We didn't make it very far, but we made it to Albany, and that's what matters. So throughout like high school and throughout college, I kept doing some programs around like summer camp, like, you know, it was a summer job. Like I thought it was fun. And then never really thought like, I never really thought if teaching was really for me. Just seeing my mom do it and thinking about like the role of teachers in our society, like I thought that I could do it, but it never felt like, oh yeah, this is what I'm going to go into. I decided my senior year of college, I decided to apply to AmeriCorps, and I served with City Year. So essentially as a student support specialist in a school, in a middle school in Queens. And the reason I decided to do that was because I was thinking about my experiences growing up in South Jamaica. And I lived in South Jamaica. I've lived in South Jamaica my entire life, and I've never gone to school in South Jamaica. I remember getting on the bus, going to school in Flushing or going to school in Bushwick when I got to high school, and going to school in different communities. And it wasn't really until I was in high school, and I'm like thinking about, you know, even younger, I was like, oh, mom, like there's a middle school right down the block. Like, why don't I just go there? She's like, Fayola, like that, those schools, like schools in our communities do not have the resources to provide you with a strong education. And you know, as a kid, you're like, oh, okay, that's a lot of words. I don't really know what any of that means. And then getting to college and high school, really thinking about, you know, thinking about redlining, thinking about segregation, thinking about anti-Blackness and classism, and all of these kind of institutional factors that have marginalized schools in Black communities, and how that kind of influenced where I got to in my life now. I ended up being a POSSE scholar. I got a full scholarship to school. I just graduated from Columbia, got my master's degree. Like, I am so proud of the work that I've done educationally, but that was a direct result of my mom and my parents having me go to school in different communities. And I loved South Jamaica. I grew up there. Like, I would not be the person I am today without having grown up in South Jamaica. And so really thinking about the impact that education had on my life, and the fact that students in my community don't necessarily have that same access unless they escape, quote unquote, and no one should have to escape their communities. Our community should serve us. That's in the same way that we give to our communities, they should be able to give back to us. And so I was really thinking about, you know, education has played such a huge role in my life. Like, why not become a teacher? And with City Year, I did City Year, and I was like, wow, I actually really, really enjoy this. And I feel like I'm good at it. And I feel like this is something that I can see myself doing. So yeah, that's how I ended up in teaching and education.
Well, I am very much a product of my upbringing. My dad works in accounting and compliances on Wall Street. So I knew very young that I wanted to be like my dad. I wanted to have a job where I got to wear a suit and go to the city and things like that. And my mother is a West Indian woman, which means that she has the job that you all expect her to have. She's a nurse. So very young, I knew that I wanted a job where I could help people and, you know, affect change in some way, like my mother. And growing up, my dad used to watch a lot of CNN and the news like that. So I was always seeing like the president and stuff on TV. So I was like, oh, I want to go into government. I want to go into law. I want to be a lawyer. I want to be the first Black president. That didn't happen. But it was when I got to college. I went to, I don't know if you can see the flag behind me, but I went to Morehouse College in Atlanta, Georgia. But it was when I got to college that I started like hearing from my professors and a lot of these great men that have like served in the civil rights movement and knew people like Dr. King and stuff, that they said, you know, the best way to affect change in your community is to go back to your community and be that change yourself. So I decided from there that I wanted to because I wanted to go into politics, I started working on elections and supporting people that I thought would be good candidates for public offices. And from there, I was just reached out to by people that like, you have a real talent for like community engagement and like talking with people and like being able to help them. We really think that like working in outreach or community affairs is something that you would be very good at. And from there, I got a job working for the Office to Combat Domestic Violence, where I did outreach and like education in domestic violence issues for 4.5 years. That's actually how I met Aminta. And then from there, I got my job now working in community affairs for the mayor's office. And I've been doing that for the last 2.5 years and couldn't picture myself doing anything else. I just enjoy being able to engage with people and find what it is that we need to do to help them. That's just what I enjoy doing.
Thank you all so much for sharing. And I do agree that sometimes our experiences do shape the people that we eventually become. So, and that's what I've heard throughout that entire question. And just to recap some of the answers is to be open-minded, try different things, learn from each other, and overall just be open to explore different things. So before we move on to the next question, does anyone have any questions for the panelists? Feel free to unmute yourselves, or you can also put your questions in the chat box.
I have a question.
Of course.
Did you have any obstacles during your like work field?
One obstacle that I had was just thinking about my positionality as a Black teacher. I went to Teachers College at Columbia, Ivy League school, like everything you would expect for an Ivy League, it was, in the sense of like being very white, being very exclusive, really privileging kind of one perspective or kind of like one frame of reference for the world. And so I remember going to my teacher education program and being surrounded by people who want to become teachers in public schools in New York City, were not from New York, did not look like our students, and did not have the experience that our students had, and going into this field. And, some people attempting to do the work of like unpacking all of that, and other people being very uninterested in really unpacking that and thinking about how their positionality would impact their teaching. So for me, being one of like very few Black people in my program, people of color in my program at all, it was really frustrating and really tiring at some times of just having to kind of navigate it being in the simultaneous positionality of like, I'm also a graduate school student, like I'm also learning and I'm also like figuring things out, but I'm also having to teach you about basic things about anti-Blackness or racism, and kind of, I'm not getting paid for that. My professor's getting paid. I'm not getting paid, even though I'm doing a lot of labor here in this classroom as a student. And so that was definitely something that was really difficult for me. Even thankfully, I appreciate, right? I went to graduate school on Zoom because of COVID. And so there was a sense of kind of like, I'm not in the sharing physical space with folks who are draining my energy. That still took a lot. One of my classes, I literally, my professor like had I don't want to get into the whole story, but she invited a guest into our space who something that was really racist and really inappropriate. And I feel like she did not address it well. And I was like, I cannot continue in this class until you have this person come back and apologize, or you actually address what occurred. And she refused to. And she was like, you can do an alternative assignment and stop coming to class. And I was like, I'll take that option. Because at that point, I cannot learn from someone who is unable to simply address something such as anti-Blackness. And to invite someone that would bring anti-Blackness into our space, to even unable to, this is something dealing with like homophobia or anti-Blackness, misogynoir, like things that impact different intersections of my identity. So, and also too, it's important to recognize that this isn't something that is unique to teaching. It's something that exists in our society as a whole. And so just having to really be aware of that, of just like, you know, that this isn't necessarily, it's going to be difficult. But I know again, that there are people who have done this before me, and I made it through my program, I graduated, and here I am teaching. And so recognizing the fact that it is an obstacle, but it's not the end of my journey. It's not the end of the road.
Thank you so much for, being vulnerable and for sharing, because I'm sure that advice would definitely help someone. So thank you. So we have another question from Anise. The question is, what keeps you motivated and have the willpower to keep going when you have those really hard days?
I'll just go quickly. I think the privilege that we have in service and being of is also the privilege to be part of something that's like bigger than yourself and bigger than, perhaps one person's vision. It's like a collective good that in the public sector we should be striving for. It doesn't always happen. But I think that's like my motivation. Like this is about what can we do for the future? What can we do for the future of this city? We're all, most of what I'm hearing tonight is most people might be from New York City on this call. Like we're from here. Don't we want it to be like amazing and the best for the future? Like I have a daughter, so, like she keeps me motivated where I'm like, I need to make sure that every day I'm contributing to a better future for her friends, for her family that she creates, for my family, for your family. Like that's kind of what keeps me going when we have those hard days. That and candy, as I sit here eating Twizzlers. So you know what? It's my practical advice.
Thank you for sharing. So the next question is for Fayola. The question is, what is the most important lesson you learned as a teacher from your students so far?
That is a great question. Y'all are asking really great questions.
I agree.
I think one of the most important lessons that I've learned from my students so far. So one thing I've learned is that, especially considering, I'm always gonna bring up the pandemic. I'm sorry, I can't help it. Considering the fact that like I'm working with 9th and 10th graders who are literally growing up in the middle of a pandemic, you can never have too much grace. I think about the things that some of my students have experienced over the course of this pandemic. And it honestly makes me emotional because children have experienced immense trauma. And not because of virtual learning, not because of masks, but thinking about death and thinking about housing insecurity, thinking about food insecurity, just a lot of things that like were really exacerbated, things that had always existed, but had really been exacerbated during the pandemic. And just recognizing the fact that like having grace, accepting welcoming a student in who I haven't seen, that my students are people first and they're children first, right? So kind of recognizing the fact that, in my classroom, like they're here in school for a few hours, a long time of the day, but like they have so much going on in their lives outside of that. And just really recognizing when they walk into my classroom, they're still full people. And that I think I'd always knew that, especially as a student in New York City, I was always aware of that. But I think actually being on the other side of that and thinking about practically, how do I embody this knowledge every day in my teaching practice? And so recognizing the fact that my students are full people, but then now as a teacher, how do I recognize that in the way that I'm interacting with my students, in the way that I conduct my classroom? And so, yeah, just having grace, being patient. There's just, I couldn't imagine being in high school and experiencing what they're experiencing right now. Having students email me and telling me, during the Omicron surge, I'm terrified of coming to school. I don't want to get sick. I have immunocompromised family members at home who I don't want to get sick. And just, really being like, the policy of the DOE is that, if you are not sick with COVID, you have to come into school. I'm still going to send you things on Google Classroom. I'm still going to email you the work, because I recognize the fact that even if you were to come into school, the fear that you're experiencing right now is going to overshadow any focus that you'll have for this work. So just really recognizing the full humanity of my students and actually putting that into my practices.
Thank you so much. That was so powerful to recognize the human component first. So important during a global pandemic and being something bigger than yourself. I also love that very much. So we have one last question, then we're going to transition into breakout rooms. For those who were working during the pandemic, what changed about your job that you had to quickly adjust to?
Zoom meetings. When you do a job in the public sector, a large part of it is that being able to engage with people face to face. We as human beings, we are social people. We have to, talk and engage with each other and touch and feel and, be able to sense vibes. And you lose something in that level of communication when you're talking to someone over a screen versus when you're talking to them in person. So that's something that had to be adjusted once the pandemic started and we moved to a lot of virtual kind of meetings, is having to engage in people in this new way where you're not able to feed off of their energy or see the subtle cues in body language or their face when you're talking to them from the end of your computer. And just, not being able to have this, because community means to commune. So when people come together, that is how you create a community. So for people to not be able to gather in spaces, it takes a lot away from what the needs of a neighborhood are, what the needs are and the things that you need to address. So I think that at times it can be a bit difficult. I'm not saying that I wanted people to risk their lives and their health, but at times I think it got to be a bit difficult, just constantly every day it's sitting in front of a laptop and talking to people for 8 hours versus being able to go outside to the park and, talk to the everyday New Yorker as they're going about their lives and seeing that that's how you can help them. So that was something that was a bit of an obstacle for me in adjusting during the pandemic.
I think in terms of like state government, I think I had to quickly adjust to the fact that like I operate from a place of love and compassion, right? Like I really love love, romantic love, platonic love, communal love. I think love is like really important in understanding humanity across, any set of race and class and all the superficial things we deal with. But what was really, I guess, gut wrenching was realizing how much of our society does not come from a place of love and support and compassion, and sort of overcompensating for how cold the world became during the pandemic. We saw a lot of love, like we did see a lot of mutual aid pop up, and we saw those like networks of connection. But it was a really jarring experience to realize, like, in the times where we really need each other, how the systems that were set in place were designed to make sure that that would not be an easy thing to navigate. So I think adjusting to what theoretically and what you see happen in actual practice was a huge jarring distinction over the pandemic. And sorry, I'm gonna have to take this because we have an outage in the district and the assembly member is calling me back. So I'll just be right back for the breakout rooms.
Okay, so I do know that Steph has to hop off at 7. So before we jump into breakout rooms, I do want to thank her for her time and all sharing all of her advice and her expertise, but also want to give her the opportunity to share any last minute advice with our group. So I'll toss it to you, Steph.
Awesome. I don't have all the answers, but the fun thing to know is that no one does. That's like that's my that's my like advice, is don't think that there's any one person that has all the answers, that has all the qualifications and gets to a certain place, and like no one is there. So just trust yourself and trust where you are at in your skill set and your knowledge and your passion. Like trust that and just continue to follow what you love and do the work that makes you excited. And it doesn't always make you excited, but just do it and do what, draws you to it. So that's my little tidbit. It has been so amazing to hear from everyone. I'm like beyond inspired and just amazed. And Kevin, we should hang because I think we're on the same floor. So we should hang. I know. Yeah, I'm like, hey. Yeah, and hopefully one day we'll all like connect in real life again. But yeah, I'm gonna sign off. It's been wonderful. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you. Alrighty, everyone. So I'm going to go ahead and add you all to breakout rooms. So give me 1 second. And just so you know, so this portion of the workshop should be around 15 minutes. So you'll have an opportunity to connect with one of our panelists a little bit more in depth. And then we will bring you back to kind of close out and any last minute questions that folks may have or anything you want to share back from your breakout room. So should be assigned. So feel free to jump right in. Are folks seeing the pop-up? I see some folks joining, but are folks able to see the pop-up to join?
I think a bunch of folks are unassigned, or you're just assigning them right now, right? Okay, so I think, yeah.
All right, welcome back. Folks will probably be joining us shortly back. Some people might let the timer run out and automatically be brought back. But I hope that was helpful and you got a chance to connect with our panelists one-on-one and got to share some stories and ask any questions that you might have. Okay, let's see. Welcome back, everyone. All right, I hope you had an opportunity to connect with our panelists a little bit more closely and you got to ask any questions in your smaller groups. So I'm going to throw it back to Afeza to kind of begin the wrapping up of our session. So go right ahead.
Of course, thank you, Nirmala. So before I ask the last question, is there any other questions for the panelists? Again, feel free to unmute yourselves or let us know in the chat box. Okay, I guess our panelists did such an amazing job explaining everything to us, so no questions. So the last question, I'm just gonna throw two questions out. You can choose either. What has helped you get to where you are, and what piece of advice would you give to others who may want to set off in a similar direction? So any piece of practical advice you would like to leave the participants with today? Or are there any questions that we didn't ask that you think are important to address?
I think I got mine. So this might sound cliche and funny, but I'm very, very serious about this. Stay ready so you don't have to get ready. That's it. Like, when it comes not only to your professional life, but to your personal life, like, that is the cardinal rule. Adulthood is simply a large game of whack-a-mole. You're just doing things and putting out fires and managing your finances against your mental health and your job and your family. That's it. It's simply a circle of that. So the more you can use your time to reflect and be self-aware of, I'm going to repeat the same thing, how you show up in the world, who you want to be, how does the world see you, and are you actually doing things in alignment with who you say you are, the easier it is going to be to navigate life, because adulthood is all about adaptability. You simply have to adapt as things come your way. So if you stay ready, you'll never really have to get ready.
To write that down for myself. That was just so powerful. Stay ready.
I think what I would say is, don't be afraid to dream big. It's not a sin to shoot for the stars and miss, but it is a sin to have no stars to shoot for. So never tell yourself that there's something that's too big for you to do, or there's something that's impossible to accomplish, because simply not true. I think so many times we hinder ourselves by thinking that something is too hard for us, or that if we try for something, it'll be impossible to attain. And we hold ourselves back by not pursuing the things that we are capable of. So I would just say that, don't think that there's any job or position that is too big for you. It's all a matter of growing to the position. And I would also just say, and I said this in the breakout session, that the important thing about being a public servant is serving the public. It doesn't work any other way. So one thing that I will leave you with is, I was at part of a forum when I was in college that was hosted by Dr. Cornel West. And he told me the most important thing for being a public servant or working with communities. And it's that to help the people, you have to love the people. If you want to save the people, you have to serve the people. So go out every day loving the people and serving the people, because that's the only way that you can affect anything.
Yeah, I think on that end, really remembering your why. Really thinking about why you started, why you want to do the work you want to do, why you're going down the path you're choosing to go down, why you're serving the community you want to serve, why you're serving it in the way you choose to serve. And really remembering that why is so helpful when you're like inundated. Like, we literally talked about our days. Those all sound extremely stressful. And just, when you wake up in the morning, just remembering like why you got into what you decided to do, and keeping that at its core. Like, there are days that I'm frustrated, days that I'm really upset, but like, it's never my students. It's always some overarching other thing that has nothing to do with them. And so when I keep that in mind, it's really helpful to stay centered and make sure that I'm like doing the work that I decided to do and the work that I am choosing to do every day that I show up.
Thank you, Kevin, Fayola, Mone't, thank you all so much. Afeza, thank you so much for facilitating. And our attendees, thank you all so much for joining us today and for listening, for being so engaged. This couldn't have gone any better, and I'm so glad we were able to share this virtual space with all of you. I will connect with our panelists to check if they're comfortable sharing their email address or LinkedIn profile. So I will go ahead and send that out in the follow-up email once they give me the green light. But just want to say thank you all so much again, and be sure to follow South Korean Women's March, or you can check out our website to follow for more of our events and our upcoming workshops. But thank you all so much. Stay safe and well, and feel free to stay on if you have any other questions for us. But yeah, thank you all so much.
Thank you, South Queens Women's March, for this amazing platform and the work that you're doing. Aminta, I owe you some certifications for your folks. Let us connect so I can get those to you. I'm back in the office. South Queens Women's March is always doing an amazing job in the community. So we want to continue to support our amazing partners. Please feel free to contact me on LinkedIn. And thank you all to our panelists. She left, but Stephanie left, but she was amazing. Kevin, thank you. Fayola, I just followed you on Instagram, so we're gonna connect, and I'm gonna have to hop off now.
I just want to as well say that, I'm honored to be a part of this panel. Mone't, Fayola, Steph, they're superstars. I just had to bring up the rear, that's all.
Yeah, thank you all so much for holding this space and creating this space for us and for folks in our community, and really thinking about the work that we do and as folks in the public sector and trying to create change in the ways that we're doing so.
Have a good night, everyone. Take care. Be safe.
Take care, everyone.